Welcome to this video on beginning Rails 8, where we're going to cover automated testing. Automated testing is when we're going to have our tests run automatically as we're developing so that we can figure out when there's errors and we can fix them before we even make a commit or push it to GitHub. We can also use automated testing, and as part of the Git push, when we push it, the push could get rejected if our tests fail. And we'll do unit testing, integration testing, and there's also system testing, but we're not going to do that in this video. Unit testing is where we're going to test either one specific controller or a model like the user model specifically, and not worry about all the pieces that it connects to. And then integration testing is where we're testing the full system that we've created as they all integrate together and make sure everything's working that way. And finally, there's system testing, and in Ruby on Rails, system testing is testing our application in a web browser to make sure all the JavaScript works with the rest of the system. We didn't write any JavaScript in this series, so we're not going to do any system testing, but it is a piece of the Ruby on Rails testing system. Now in this video, I'm also going to show test-driven development. That's where we'll write our tests first, and then as our tests fail, they'll guide us in implementing our solution that make the test pass. And there's lots of different methods and opinions on how to test. This is just one way to test. So it's not really important on how you test, just as long as you do test and you get good coverage so that if you break something, you know that it's broken before you push that to production. And for instance, in the last video when we implemented federated login, I updated the code that creates a new user. Now that could have broken creating a regular user without federated login. And if that did, if I had automated testing, I would find out that it broke that right away and I'd be able to fix it. Whereas since I didn't have any testing, it could be broken. I could push it up and I could make this code go live, and I wouldn't even know that users can't sign up anymore unless they sign up through GitHub. The first step is to install some more gems that are. Now, the first thing we need to do is install some additional gems that will make it a little bit easier to test. However, Ruby on Rails already has a test system already set up and integrated into your application. We're going to add this retest gem. It doesn't have to be required. We're putting it in the development group because this is something that we want on our development machine. And this will help us run our test automatically. As we save our files, it'll rerun the tests that belong to that file. And if we broke something, we'll find out right away. And the other gem we'll add is this mini test reporters, and that'll allow us to control the output of our tests so we can see a little bit better view of what happens when our tests run. Another gem I'm going to use is FactoryBot Rails, and this will allow us to create models in the database that we can use to test. The default way is to use fixtures. Now, I don't really like fixtures because the fixtures are defined in one file, and then our tests are defined in another file, whereas this allows us to have our models defined in the same file as our tests so we can see everything that's going on. So whenever we add new gems, we need to press Control C and quit our server and run bundle to install them. And then once they're installed, we can restart our server. Now, if you notice in your test folder, there's a file called test helper, and this is what's going to load all of our testing code. And we need to include those gems that we just added. So we're including FactoryBot Rails. We're also going to use more of a spec. This will make our tests read a little bit better in this mini test. By the way, mini test is the main testing framework that Rails uses. Capybara allows us to interact with a web page like we're interacting with a web browser. So a lot of methods we call come from this Capybara. And then this is the mini test reporters that allow us to modify the output of our tests so that we can have a better view. And then we'll use that mini test reporters, and this progress reporter is the one that I like best, and we'll also add some color. But you can look at this guide and see if there's a better output that you like. And then finally, we're going to use the Capybara DSL in our integration test. Capybara is already included for our system test, but I like using it in our integration tests as well. And one more change we need to make is we'll comment out this fixtures line because we're not using fixtures, we're using FactoryBot Rails instead. Now the other thing is when we ran our generator, it created us a bunch of controller test. So we're going to go ahead and take all of these files and we're going to delete them. Now, as you delete them, make sure you're deleting the test files that are in the test folder, and you're not deleting your controllers in your application, or you just deleted all the code you worked on so far. Now, the reason why I'm deleting the controller tests is those are unit tests for the controller, but I like testing the controller and the view at the same time because view tests are really hard to keep current and up to date. And really, we just want to make sure that our application is working. So that's my opinion. I like testing the controllers and the views together. And the best way to do that is with an integration test. So I'm going to write integration tests. I'm not going to write any controller tests. So let's go ahead and create our first test, and we'll test our home page and our about page. Those are our static pages. Those are good tests to have to make sure that our website is working. So we'll use the generator to generate an integration test, and I'm going to name this the same name as our controller. Now, we want to use the same name as the controller, so the site's controller is the one that hosts the home page and our about page. So that's why I'm creating an integration test for those. So next, I'm going to add this file in my test folder. There's a helpers folder where we can add some code or methods that we can call to make it easier for us to test. And two methods I'm going to add is assert text and refute text. And this will just check to see if our page has something on it or if it doesn't have something on it. So it's a nice simple test that we can run to see if something is on our page or not. And to include that, we're going to have to go to our test helpers. So after we save this file, make sure it's text helpers, not test helpers. And in this test helper, we'll need to include that. So we'll include all of the files that we add into our helpers folder into our test helper. And then in our integration test, we'll include those two methods that we have. And then opening up our site's integration test that we created before, we can go ahead and write our first test. So we'll test that the root page loads. We'll visit the root path, and this visit is from Capybara, and it allows us to visit a page. So we'll visit the root path, and we'll use that helper to just check to see if the word hello is on the page. Now to run it, we'll to open up a new terminal window, and we'll run our test is just bin rels test, and it will run our tests. And you might get a lot of output in this, but you will hopefully your test will work. And we can see that our test isn't working because there is no hello on this page. But first, let's fix all of that messy output that you might have gotten. So we're going to fix that in our package.json file. We're going to replace this scripts with some new scripts that we want to put in and that basically are going to quiet all of those deprecation warnings that you might be getting when you run your tests. So I'll have a link to the description below to a GitHub gist where you can copy and paste this, at least this section right here into your code. Make sure you keep this comma in there or else you'll have a syntax error. But once you do that, you should be able to run your tests and get nice clean output. And now we could see that this is failing because we cannot find the word hello in all of this. So that's good that we know that the test fails when it doesn't find the text. So maybe we should try to find to-do list on the page. So replace in hello with to-do list, and then we can run our tests again. And we could see that we got that test passing. Now it's going to get a little annoying to run our tests again and again, and that's why we put in our retest. And all we have to do to run that is just type retest, or you might have to type bundle exec retest if it doesn't work. But for me, I have things set up so I could just type retest. And now it's looking at all of my files, and whenever I save a file, it will go ahead and rerun the test. So if I make a little change and save this file, you can see that my tests just run automatically in the background. So that's really nice. And by the way, to get out of this, you can't hold Control C. You just need to type exit and then you'll quit the retest. And you could just run retest again and you're back in. If we want to run all of the tests that we've written, you just do RA, which stands for run all tests, and that will run all tests. Right now, we still only have this run test. So let's go ahead and test our about page. So we can, a lot of times it's not good to copy and paste code, but these are tests and I feel like it's okay to copy and paste tests. and just modify them to what we need. And we'll just say about page loads. So we'll visit the about path and we'll see if that test worked. And that test did work because we do have to-do list on our page. And if we visit the about path, we can see we still have to-do list here, but maybe we should test something here like maybe about page. So fixing that, that's just maybe a little better test than making sure we have the to-do list on there, making sure that it really is the about page, and you can see that that test passed. Now, the next two tests I'll create will test our sign up and our login. So we want to make sure we can sign up a user and we can log in a user. To do that, that's going to be the user controller that we're testing. And it's also the authentications controller, but I'm just going to create one test for this called the user integration test. So creating that integration test, now all we need to do is modify this test to see if someone can create a new account. Now this should just read exactly like a story on how a user would interact with your web page. So assuming a user would come to the home page, they'll go over here, they'll click the sign up button, they'll fill out all these fields, and then they'll click sign up, and they should be able to have their account created and be logged in. So here's the story that I've written. We'll visit the root path. We'll click the link sign up. We'll fill in the name with a name and an email address and the password and a confirmed password. We'll click the button sign up. And then we'll make sure that somewhere on the page it says signed up. That's our flash message. We'll make sure that they have the link to their profile, the test user. And we'll make sure that there isn't a login link anymore because they should be logged in. And so that's why we have these assert text and refute text. So it's really easy to test to see what's happening. And again, I'm not testing the full view that it has all the content there, just little pieces that tell us that my application is working. And as you can see, I have an error when this ran, and it says unable to find field email address that is not disabled. And you can see here my email address, the A is lowercase, so this is case sensitive. And so we'll use a lowercase a. And now the password field, this needs to be a capital P. And notice this retest, it just starts retesting the test as I save it. Now it's only running this one test because this is the file that I saved. But if you do want to run all tests, you can just do retest all and you'll get all the tests. And this is really helpful when we start to get hundreds of tests. Sometimes we want to focus in on the tests that we're working on and we don't want to run all of the tests over and over again. But as soon as we're finished with the feature, we could just run all the tests, make sure we didn't break anything. And let's name this test the right thing. User can create an account. Now, let's also see what happens if the user doesn't match our passwords correctly or something else. They should be able to see error messages. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste the test. And again, I feel like this is okay because we're just reusing code and this is testing code. User can create an account, or how about shows errors? Shows errors when creating an account. And this time we'll go ahead and replace this secret with wrong. So we should see something like the passwords do not match. And we could see that we have this. This is a good way to kind of test our test a little bit, make sure we get it failing when it's not behaving the right way. And we can see that passwords doesn't match. That's a good thing. Assert, maybe fix errors. And we'll just use this doesn't match right here. And let's make sure they're still logged out. So we'll, instead of refuting that there's a login button, we'll assert that there is a login button. So saving that, we can run our test again. And it said expected to find fix errors in this, and it says fix the errors. So that's a good thing. We can copy and paste from this little error message. And saving, now all of our tests work. And again, we can retest all of them. Now next, we want to test to see if the user can log in, but that assumes that there is a user already in our database. Now just really quick, I didn't mention, but we're using a separate database than our development database. So the data that you've added in by hand using the web is not going to carry over into our test database. This is a separate database, and usually the test wipes the entire database after every test, so we get a clean slate. And that's a better way to do testing, is a clean slate database. But how can we create a user? Well, we could visit the root path and create a user this way and then test the login thing. But what we'll do is we'll use FactoryBot to create a user and save it in the database, and then we can go ahead and log that user in. So to set up FactoryBot, we're going to create a new file in this test folder, and we're going to call it factories.rb. And in here, we could define a factory to create a new user. So each time we create a new user, we'll just call it test user and add a number onto the end. And this is a sequence. So each new user will get a new number, and that'll help us keep unique email addresses as well. We'll also make sure that they have a password field. So back in our users test, and the user can log in, we can go ahead and create a user using FactoryBot. So user equals FactoryBot.create, and we want to create a user. Now we can also pass in fields that we care about in this test. Now the factory creates default fields for all the fields I don't care about, but in order to log them in, I need to know their email and their password. So email address is testuser@test.com, and then we'll add a password. So after we created the user, we'll visit the login path. We'll fill in the email address with the email address that the user has. We'll fill in the password, and I think we have to type this the same because it's not guaranteed that this user will have the password, because remember, we're not saving the password in the database, it's the password digest, but we'll click the button login, and then it'll assert that there's login somewhere on the page. It will assert that we got the user's name on the page as well, and that there is no login button, because that shows me that someone's logged in. Now, as you can see, I saved this and it says unable to find button login. So visiting the login page, you can see this button is called sign in. So fixing that, we'll save. And now it's saying expected to find login, and then we have all this stuff. And here is the flash message right here on my page. So that's probably the text I want to have here to make sure they're logged in. So we'll save that. And now we got all of our tests working. We'll just copy and paste this and test to make sure that if a user has the wrong password, that they can't log in. And so I copied this login test, and then the only thing I changed is I have the wrong password, and I'm hoping that it will say invalid email or password on the page. Make sure the user is not logged in, that their name is not on the page, and that there's still a login button. So I just reverse these two tests and make sure, and we can run that. And it says expected to find invalid, and instead it says try another email or password. So we'll just say look for try another. And fixing that, now we have all four tests logging in and creating users working. Next thing we want to do is create tests that test our task model and also our task controller. So I'm going to create an integration test that tests our tasks. And then this should generate a new test file in our integrations folder called tasks test. Now, we don't want our test to test the entire website, to just test one functionality. So we don't want to go create a user, log that user in, then create a couple of tasks, then see if the user can see their tasks. Instead, we just want to focus on the index page of the task controller to see if the user can see the tasks that belong to them. So first thing we're going to need to do is a way to create tasks for this user. So what we want to do is make sure that we add a factory for our tasks so that we can create tasks in our tests. And so we'll have a title. The title will have a number on the end, so each new task will have a unique number. The due date, we'll just put 1 day from now, and the priority will always be 1. And now we're going to add an association to a user. So by default, if we just create a task, it'll also create a new user to own this task. But we can also assign the user when we create these tasks. So what we'll do is we'll create 2 tasks that belong to the user that I created, and 1 task that doesn't belong to the user. We'll visit the tasks path. We'll hope to see the 2 tasks that the user owns, and hope to not see the task that the user doesn't own. So this is a good way to test to see if the user can see only their tasks. So we'll go ahead and save this file, and that'll automatically run the test in the background. And you can see that we expected to find task one on the page, and you could see here we're actually on the login page. That's because we never logged in this user. So that's going to be our second problem is we're going to have to log in the user before the user can see the tasks. So we're probably going to need to log in the user a lot. So let's go ahead and create a helper that will log in users so we can just have the user be logged in, and then we can just test what the user needs to do on that page. So we'll go ahead and create a new file in our helpers folder, and we'll call this authentication helpers because these will be helpers that will help us with authentication. So, and I'm also going to rename my helpers to the snake case because that's the Ruby on Rails standard. And in my authentications helper module, now this is camel case, I'm adding two methods. One method that will take in a user as a parameter, it'll visit the login path and try to log in that user. And another function that will just log in a user and you can pass it nothing. This is an optional parameter and you can pass it in nothing, and then it'll just create a new user and log in that user, and it will return the user. So in case we want to do anything to the user afterwards, we can. But also we can pass in some options so we can set the user's name or email address how we like it. Now in our test helper, we're going to have to include those authentication helpers in there. So we'll just include that in and we'll save it. And back in the tasks task here, instead of creating a new user through FactoryBot, we'll just call login a user. And if we wanted to, we could pass in a hash here, like say we want the password to be something specific. But we'll just go ahead and let this user be a default user because all we care is that this user will own a couple of tasks and not own this third task. So now we'll save this file. And you can see I'm unable to find a login button. So let's go to our website and figure out what that button's called. So clicking on the login button, you can see that it's actually called sign in. So replace the login with sign in our authentications helper. And that ran one test, but it only ran the one test. Let's go ahead and try to resave this file and see what happens. And that test passed. It had the three assertions that there are two tasks that it can see and one task that it cannot. And just to make sure, we'll do RA, run all of our tests and make sure they're all passing. Okay, now that I've shown you how we can test a little bit, we can log in users and we can test the users doing various things. The next test we'd probably want to write is a test to see if the user can create a task, then a test to see if the user can edit a task, and then a test to see if the user can delete a task. At this time, I'm going to transition over to test-driven development. So I'm going to create a new controller, and I'm going to call it a reminders controller, a new model as well, so that users can create reminders that might be different than tasks. But instead of creating the controller and making it all work to start with, I'm going to write the tests first, and then the tests are going to help me develop the controller and the model. As the tests fail, I'll try to fix the tests, and then as the tests get fixed, it'll guide me on how to develop. So I went ahead and created an integration test for reminders. Now, just a little note, if you are taking my class, you do not need to create a new model and controller for your assignment. You'll just continue on testing your tasks model or the model you created in your controller assignment. But I'm just going to create this to show you how test-driven development works. So I already created some tests. First of all, I did the same test I did for tasks, making sure that a user can see their reminders. And then I did another test to make sure that a user can create a reminder. And I'm betting these tests are failing because we have never added any code about reminders into my project. So we could see undefined local variable reminders path. So it doesn't know what reminders path is. Also, it probably doesn't know how to create a reminder as well. So we'll go ahead and create a model for our reminders. So we'll go ahead and use our generator to generate a reminder with a title, body, and that references our users. Let's look over this migration that it created, make sure everything is correct before we run our migrations. Now that we've created the model, let's just do a little bit of unit testing. Now, unit testing is going to test the model on its own outside of all the views and the controllers. So I wrote one test to make sure that the model has a valid factory. And right now we can see validation failed because the user must exist. And that's probably because we don't have a factory yet that we've created. So let's go ahead and add reminders to our factories. Now you can see we actually do have the factory. This was created by our generator. Let's just fix this factory so that it has an association with the user. We'll also do a sequence for the title, and the body will have it say something about reminders. And now saving that, we still get undefined very local variable method reminders pass. So we still need to create the controller, but this still do a little bit more model testing. Just a quick note, I'm using build here instead of create. So build builds the model, but it doesn't save it in the database, whereas create would save it in the database. So I'm building a fully valid reminder, at least according to this first test. I'm invalidating it by making sure the title is nil. So we should have this valid return false. But saving this file, we'll rerun all the tests. You can see that it ran my model test and it expected true to not be truthy, and that's on this line right here. So that means it's still valid even when it doesn't have a title. So that tells us we need to go to the model file and fix it. So back in our application, in our models, we got our reminder file. It does belong to a user. The generator created that, but we'll also validate the title and make sure that it's present. So we'll save this file. And rerunning all the tests, we can see that now that test is passed, and now we're just having this test that reminders path is undefined, and that's because we haven't created a reminders controller yet. So go ahead and create a controller for our reminders, and then open up our routes file, and fix the routes file by removing what it added in there and using resources so we can use RESTful routes. Now we'll rerun our tests. That this test is failing. It's expected that users can see their reminders. It's expected to find reminder 3 on the page, but all we're left with is a default view that hasn't been edited yet. So we can look at our controller and see that we're not loading the user's reminders out. So after loading the reminders out of the database, we'll fix our index page and loop through all the reminders, drawing them out. And we also added a partial to make sure that we have reminders drawn up on the page. And so rerunning all the tests, it says undefined method for reminders for an instance of a user. So that what that means is our model, our user model probably does not have the reminders associated with it. So we'll add has many reminders. And rerunning all of our tests to see what we still have left to do, we can see that we're not able to run our create a reminder because there's no new reminder button. I haven't done that. It also looks like I have an error. And that's probably my reminders controller right here that got generated. And all I want to do is delete that new controller test. So I'm deleting the controller test to get rid of that one. So off camera, I created the new action and the create action, just like we did in the task controller. And then I also added on my new page, I render up a form, and then I have the form on this page. And we went ahead and ran our tests, and we still have an error. And it could see that it expects to find reminder created in all of this, and I just have the wrong case on the R. We have reminder created, but it's not capitalized. So I'll copy that and paste it into my test, and we'll save this file. And we can see that those tests passed. We can try running all of our tests and see if they pass. I'm just going to add one more test. What happens if the user tries to create it, but they forget to fill in a title? So we have this new test that I pretty much copied and pasted, but I took out filling in the title, so now I'll have a blank title. When they click the create reminder button, they should see fix the errors and that the title can't be blank. And rerunning all the tests, they all pass. So that's test-driven development. You write your test first, the tests fail, and then you go and work and you make your test pass. And if you notice, I didn't go to my web page except for to maybe fix some tests and find the text. Mostly you're just developing, and the automated tests are just running in the background, guiding you in your development. Now, if you are taking this class, you need to just test your original model that you created in your controller assignment. Make sure you have a test a test for the index action, a test to create something, a test that shows when the creation fails, and then also an edit or update test. So updating your task and also updating the task with errors, and then also a destroy task. So I'll let you guys work out those update and destroy tests on your own.